tonight is, for me, an odd place to summarize what I've been doing before. If you're new to what we're doing, I propose an idea constantly under instruction, construction, an idea constantly under construction. That one thing that religion can do is take a community and have them read together a difficult text. You only find this in a book club, maybe a Torah study group, but in general, if that's what one of the things that Judaism is, it's a community that engages in difficult texts. In fact, I was talking to a person today that agreed with me and said that one of the greatest features of the Talmud is what's called the Shaklavataria, the back and forth of the Talmud, where you go in and you don't have to take the sides of one of the rabbis on one side or the other of a machloket, of a rabbinic dispute, but definitely you're seeing a dispute go on right in front of you. Now, the disputes are called machloket l'shem shamayim, a dispute for the sake of heaven, meaning we're going to do this dispute in the right way. It's over something important, and it is actually for the sake for the sake of heaven. In fact, there's a Pirkei Avot that I love whenever I want to talk about it, Machloket L'Shem Shemayim, and that's an end of Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, where Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that the world stands on three things, on Din, Emet, Vishalom. Din can mean law, it can mean thinking well, it can mean logic. uh, Emet, of course, has many, many meanings, but we'll think here about speaking truthfully. V'shalom, all toward the cause of peace. So if you have din, emet, and shalom as your basis, then we can engage in machloket. Then we can engage in disagreements, and they eventually will be for Shem Shemayim. If people don't have the premise of din, emet, v'shalom, if they don't commit themselves to speaking logically and clearly and rationally and reasonably, and if they are not interested in emet, but rather just making their point, there's not going to be shalom at the end. So this is in Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, if I'm not mistaken, Mishnah 19, depending on your edition. It's in any full prayer book. You can also buy it. It's one of the most worthy things to study. You know that my practice is when I go to synagogue, I more or less ignore what's going on in the synagogue and find a verse that I like, and I sit and memorize my verse. Uh, so I have found two synagogues. I found a evening synagogue and a morning synagogue because I thought for me it's time for me to get over myself, and I'm never going to find the perfect synagogue. And I might as well just find the least perfect one that I enjoy. What we say the one I the somebody will remember. If you don't like going to synagogue, find the one you dislike the least. So here they are. I found a conservative synagogue, super nice people. They're really glad that I've come. I'm already reading Torah once a week. I haven't done that for a while, and just a nice, chill group of people. The other one is local, all very super Orthodox, but again, very glad that I came in and love to talk to me. And that's where I sat down, and the liturgy is very full. I think to myself, I have an hour. Whatever happens in an hour is what I get done. And I opened the Siddur, and it goes to Pirkei Avot. I found that one, meditated on it, memorized, and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that through Shabbos with me. The world stands on three things: Din, Emet, Vishalom. Din can mean law, but it also means in Hebrew logic or thinking well. Sometimes when there's a machloket, they say lefi hadin. Sometimes the Talmud, they prove their point by quoting text, who has the better usage of a text. And other times they quote a text by right thinking. You say, yes, you have a great text. Lefi hadin, according to just good thinking, the following must be true. Now that's the thing that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel puts first. Hadin, emet, vishalom. Din, emet, vishalom. So one day we'll talk about all of those together. What I wanted to do was wrap up teaching that I've been giving, and that's the teaching on difficult text. I began with one of the most difficult texts, the text of the blasphemer, back in Leviticus chapter 25. You may recall the text says that a son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man, the son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man. Well, the problem is the biblical identity was passed patrilineally. When we think of matrilineal descent, that's really establishing basic Jewish identity. And that's an idea that came around in the time of the Talmud and has become the rule of law. But tribal identity was passed by the father. Since this man had an Israelite mother, but not an Israelite father, it says very clearly, his father was an Egyptian, he had no identity. So we spent time wondering about this guy and what it felt to be this guy. And there's a couple of ways to go. So the more traditional way to go is he tries to line up where his wife was, where I'm sorry, where his mother's tribe was, and they said, "Look, you're not a male. You can't line up here. You can only line up here if your father is an Israelite, and he's not." So option one, be philosophic. Say, yeah, the law has not caught up to the idea. There's a lot of people here that aren't Jewish or don't have Jewish fathers. We're here. We're here to stay. And we're gonna find a way for you guys to fit us in because we are 100% in this mission to take this, as our Torah portion says, this wise law, the kind of which the world has never seen. I want to be in this community that has a wise law, the kind of which the world has never seen, and live under this wise law. And you guys are going to find a way to do it. Or start a fight because you can't line up. And as the guys are fighting, out of his frustration for not being let in and his frustration for being the outsider, he says the worst things about God, suddenly saying it's all God's fault. This is why it is. If the law were better and God were a better lawgiver, and it says he pierces the name of God and curses. People stand back and say, "You can't do that. You're like, not only are you an outsider, you're an outlaw." And they discuss what to do, and they eventually put him to death. And I read this, and I just, my heart's broken because I think, of course, nowadays we find a place for this person. Person comes in and says, "I don't feel like be here. I'm not born Jewish. My mother, this, my father." We say, "It doesn't matter. We'll find a way where there's where there's a rabbinic will, there's a halakhic way. We're gonna find a way to fit you in." We wouldn't say to somebody, "You can't line up." But in his time, it was really important. But what we've learned from it was how many people feel marginalized by one group or another, told they don't fit, and the hurt it inflicts upon them. Sometimes the shame it inflicts upon them that they're not good enough, that they don't measure up to the needs of the group, and how important group identity is to individual identity. And when people are looking for the group, the importance of the group in folding a person in. Just by comparison, the Friday night uh, synagogue that I think I'm going to start going to. One thing I was walking home from my other synagogue on Shabbos afternoon, and they were letting out. And as I let out, the rabbi, a few other people came to me and said, "Well, why didn't you come to our service today? What's going on?" I said, I explained to them. They said, "Well, come on inside. We want to get to know you." So I went inside. We chatted a little bit, and I mentioned, because it's close to my house. I said, I came a couple of times to use your library, but you guys were closed. He said, "Here's the key. To have a key to the building. Come in anytime you want. Learn anytime you want." I said, "We'll wait till we get to know each other before we do that." Um, and I was, just super warm and inviting. In fact, on Thursday, I was meeting a friend nearby. That's the place where people say, "Where are we going to meet?" I'll say, "We're going to meet in front of the synagogue." And it happened to be open. My friend was there, and they pulled my friend in who did not like it very much. And we finally got out. And he said, that energy is going to save the Jewish religion in the state of Israel. He says, not that type of Judaism. He says, because I don't think that type appeals to much more than a very small slice of people. He says, but if we can find the kind of Judaism that will appeal to Israelis with that kind of welcoming energy, we're going to save Judaism in Israel. So this newish friend of mine, he and I are on a mission to save Judaism in Israel. No less than that. We're going to save Judaism in Israel. So I found a local synagogue that's warm and likable and welcoming, and I don't have to be on the same page. And I go for my hour, do what I want, and then I go home and say, see you next week. So that's a good thing. So our text has to do with the with first that guy. I'm trying to imagine. I come in, they say, "Well, we're gonna examine you. You know, like the weave and the warp of the garment, and find out who you are, and you don't quite fit." And so there are 100 other synagogues, but try to imagine if every synagogue said, "Before you can come in, we have to examine your yichus and your background, every this and every that." Probably wouldn't get mad, probably would just become a Buddhist or something. But, there's a certain point where this guy just had it. He just had it and he blew up. So I'm trying to think about the internal work that he could have done and especially a better law. So I place this on in the hands of Moses and God, because later on when the daughters of Zelophehad bring up a problem, I think they've learned their lesson. I think they've learned that we probably ought to admit that there are gaps in the law and people are suffering. I was going to use that as my final text. I still might do another session, but it's so well known, perhaps I don't have to do it. In any case, the second case I brought to you was the again a case that I'm willing to revisit, and that's when all the Israelites are brought to the borders of the land of Canaan. They send out 12 spies. 10 spies come out with a how shall I say, with an ambivalent report. The land is great. However, the people there are giants. We saw the Bnei Anakim there, people, a residue from the giants tribe. We saw the Nephilim there. Now we haven't seen Nephilim since Genesis chapter 1, I think verses 1 through 5. And they're a vestige from the book of Enoch, which doesn't even is not even in the Hebrew canon. So it's like saying I saw Godzilla and I saw King Kong. It's like, yeah, those are only in books. Well, we saw them there. We saw Godzilla and King Kong, and they were coming after us. So when every monster that ever appeared in the Bible, they saw in Canaan. When they toured the land, they said we can't do it. We got to go back to Egypt. And then, of course, they said we felt like grasshoppers in our eyes, and they saw it. We looked like grasshoppers to them. And come to speak of it, Egypt wasn't so bad. Why did we leave there? And there's a great rebellion, and eventually God says, "You have to stay here for 40 more years." So, by the way, the Hebrews did not wander in the desert for 40 years. They were in the exact same place for 40 years, called Kadesh Barnea. They were sitting it out until a new generation could come and go back into the land of Canaan. Well, there are so many things from this, is that they were actually frightened. I mean, the worst boogeymen and monsters imaginable is what they saw there. Now, maybe they did see some giants and some Nephilim there. I don't know. That doesn't matter, because if you're a military unit on a mission, you don't say, "Hey, well, those other soldiers look kind of big." You think, "Well, how do we take them out? Because we're on a mission." It's called divekut lemisima. You're attached to your mission, not your feelings. So they don't know this. They haven't been trained, and that's one thing. As I looked at, I thought to myself, they've never been to boot camp. No one ever taught them how to train to be a soldier. So again, I look at God and I say, wait a minute. They just got out of Egypt. They just got the Torah of Mount Sinai. There's the big thing with the molten calf incident. They're not very sturdy. You take them to the borders and you send them into fight. And I said, and I'm looking at God, and I want to quiz God, and I want to say to God, "You made a mistake." And God says, and God has a retinue of his supporters around him. One pulls me aside and says, "Look, it's the first time he's been doing this. He's young. First time he created anything. First time he had a people, and he doesn't know people's limitations. And we're sorry he's working out this way, but be patient. It'll get better." And I say, "Okay, um, all right. So guys, take care of him." They go, "Yeah, he's rough. He's very very opinionated, very arrogant, very sure of himself, and makes mistakes all the time. And we're just, we're trying to keep him straight." I say, "Okay, um, you guys, I believe him." And you say he's eventually gonna come around. They say yes. I say, "Okay, I'll stay in. I'll keep my eye on you people." Anyway, so the failure of the spies, and on one hand, is, again, I'm taking the story seriously. It's the failure of the divine, that the divine can't place people in tasks they actually can't do. Now, I think about some of us. Many people say, "Well, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger." I don't believe so. I think whatever may not kill you might injure you, might put you way back. And sometimes we're in situations in life where we say to ourselves, as I've said during this series, I was just not prepared for. Nothing in life prepared me for what I had to come up with. And the things I wasn't prepared for, I think of me and Rob together, we did it poorly. We were trying to figure it out. We're like building a life raft on the ocean. And it would have been way better, if someone would have said, "Oh, you want to get off this ship? Here's a really nice PT boat, take off." Nope, put us on a leaky life raft, gave us some tools and said, "Build the life raft while you're out there." Sometimes we're just not ready for things and we're going to do things poorly. And that comes a time of true self-acceptance and say to yourself, I've never been here. I don't know what I'm doing. I know what I want the end to be. And I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel guilt. I don't want to feel incompetent. I'm just going to try to muddle through until the muddling goes down and the way goes more clear. So I had a lot of sympathy for the spies. Our last episode was last week with it's called the Mikoshesh Eitzim, long name for an anonymous guy. The Koshesh means to gather up. Eitzim means sticks. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, completely anonymous character. They found somebody violating the Sabbath gathering sticks. He doesn't say anything. They arrest him. He doesn't say anything. They take him to the guardhouse. Say, "What's up?" He's out there gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. Yeah, that's a pretty obvious uh, Sabbath violation. The law's pretty clear. He doesn't say anything. They take him out and say, "Look, the consequence is you're put to death for Sabbath violation." He also doesn't say anything. So I thought this is like suicide by cop. You want to commit suicide in the ancient days, go pick up sticks on the Sabbath and they'll take care of you. And he's always been a mystery to me. And when you read the Midrash, they're trying to figure out why he did it. And I read, as I told you, this imperfect book called Suicide of the Soul by James Hillman. And he says one thing that suicide is, it breaks theological conventions, sociological conventions, psychological conventions, the expectations of family. Everything around us says you're not allowed to commit suicide. So one thing that suicide function as is a way of saying, I'm out of all your systems. I don't care about God. I don't care about society. I don't care how my family feels. I really don't care about all of that. I'm going through what I'm going through. And something tells me I got to get out of here. Whatever this thing called life is, I don't want to contribute it anymore. And I don't want anybody to contribute anything to me anymore. My life is hell. I've counseled some people who eventually committed suicide. Of course, I felt all the suicide prevention training I felt guilty. And I had people tell me, when people want to commit suicide, you can have all the suicide prevention training you want. There's not a lot we can do. But I really thought about what it meant for a person to say, my final meaningful act in life is to say that life is not meaningful enough for me and I want out. And by just having to say, I'll just have to accept that is one of the ways that people go through life, is that moment in life. Hillman's book gets very confusing. So if you read the first three chapters and like it and then you don't, join my club. All right, those are the texts that I brought up, and they are difficult texts. They're texts worthy of very short text. They're texts worthy of you finding another person and say, let's break open the text and let's just discuss the text without an end in sight. But mainly on the first pass, it's not what it seems it is. On the first pass, we can look what's behind the text, the background behind the text. So what does this have to do with religion? You see, I'm reading a book called Reimagining Christianity. Person who recommended it to me. You want to raise your hand? Roland, you want to raise your hand? Thank you. I'm really enjoying the book. I don't, I have such a rigorous study schedule. I don't put other books in. Well, I'm reading maybe a chapter a week. I'm going super slowly with it. I don't have the wherewithal in my life to implement it. That would have been more in the days when we had the building. But I'm really loving his idea. If I can give you a metaphor, people say theology, that how can a just God, allow good people to perish? And I remember thinking, I think to myself, that's not what we talk about. When I go to synagogue, we don't talk about theology and theodicy. And I said, we go and the guy davens and he's davening. I'm trying to find a verse to anchor into and meditate on for a while. And then we have the Torah reading. We all get to read the Torah portion. And there's always it's a conservative synagogue, and there's always some mumbling in the background because people get bored. And then we have Kiddush, where he goes on the porch and everybody shares information, and swaps jokes and talks about the terrible time in Israel and creates some community, goes home. Not once has anybody brought up theology and did God create the world. So all the things that people think religion are, they're actually not. There's a lot more about what it feels like to be there, what it feels like to be with other people, the way the text and the songs add and shape to our life. I haven't finished the book yet, but I love the approach he's taking. I wish I would have written a similar book, and maybe I will, something on the Judaism that when people say, "Oh, you're Jewish, what do you believe?" And I like to say, I don't know what I believe, but I read a really great verse yesterday. Can I share it with you? That kind of it's an indicative anecdote of what being Jewish feels like to me. I study and I think, and I love to share with people what I study. So in this kind of definition of religion, what ought we do? Study difficult text, allow them to put pressure on us to understand them in ways, and let them shift our souls, and then find other people to talk about them with. So that's for me, kind of yet another definition of religion. So here's a text I wanted to wrap up with. It actually follows right on the picker up of stickers guy, and the the they get to the borders of Canaan in chapter 13. They rebel in chapter 14. Chapter 15, it's like God wants to take care of some very simple business to calm people down. Like, okay, that horrible scene is over. Now we're going to talk about kneading on the threshing floor and this kind of animal, like all kinds of details to keep, sometimes when there's something big happens, you say, let's go clean the silverware. Like let's just calm ourselves down and, do some not very heavy lifting, nothing that requires too much thought. Well, the editors of the Bible, whom I admire more and more and more as time goes on, the editors of the Bible have this story sitting on the shelf here. Right? The story of the man who picked up sticks and got put to death. They're thinking, where do we put this story? And I goes, let's put it right here. They go, why? Just watch what happens. So you have the story of the rebellion. Then you have what looks like leftover material, but I'm going to call busy work. And they go, we're going to put it right in here. Okay, so here's what well, that's from last week. The rebellion. I talked about that last week. And then it wraps up. It wraps up after he's been put to death. It says with the mitzvah of the tzitzit. Vayom Adonai el Moshe lemor, speak to the children of Israel and say to them that they will make themselves tzitzit on the corners of their garments. Right, just in time. Right, just in time. What are we waiting for? Well, lots to say there. Just in time. God tells us to put tzitzit on our garments and place upon the tzitzit each corner a turquoise wool. It'll be a tzitzit if you do that. And then here's the kicker, that you will see it and remember all the commandments of God and perform them. Velo tatur achrei levavchem ve'achrei einechem asher atem zonim achreihem. And do not explore your heart and go after your eyes, which lead you astray. Remember and perform all the commandments and be holy to God. So, so people call this the portion on tzitzit. Of course, a better name would be the portion on remembering, the portion on forgetting. Because the only reason we have tzitzit is because we forget. We forget, I'm going to say the ritual law for sure. We forget the moral law. The moral law is what we are actually supposed to be doing with our lives. We'll call that the moral law, especially as it affects other people. And the spiritual law. I mean, there's a law on how to conduct your inner life. There's a law on a way to be a human being. Um, now and then I find I'm sitting with a group of people and they don't know that I'm a wisdom work black belt, and someone mentions some argument he has with his wife, and I say, may I have a suggestion? And they say, sure, what's your suggestion? I said, well, you might want to think about this. They go, well, who are you? Like who talks that way? And I said, okay, I'm working on a book called Good People, Bad Habits. And they say, well, get that book out. So yeah, they go, now no one says, I never heard of that. They say, like that, you're right. That is exactly how I ought not talk to my wife or my kids. So people know it, like in some kind of platonic sense, the information on how to live was already downloaded to them. They've just studiously avoided studying what it means to be a person of goodness. So it starts by saying, first we're going to give you something, and if you put it on and look at the fringes, you will remember who you are. And then they say what the human condition is. Um, you'll keep God's commandments, um, and then you will not go straying. Lo taturu. By the way, the spies were given the commandment, Latur et haaretz. The authors here's you the exact same word. It said, Lo tatur achrei levavchem. Now, this is a fascinating word. Lo taturu achrei levavchem. Try to imagine that your inner life, like Canaan, that your inner life is a big uncharted region. It's a big uncharted region. And you're going to go in and start scouting around, or it's going to come in and influence you. But unlike the spies who were told, go in and chart the region so we can see how to bring it under control, how to conquer it. But what we do is we go into the darkness, that dark region, that inverted hill, that hill of darkness, without a map, without purpose, without meaning, and seeing how. Like I sometimes think of this as the abyss in when the Torah begins. In the beginning of God's created the heavens and the earth was tohu vavohu, v'choshech al pnei tehom, and there was dark on the al pnei on the tehom. Well, what is a tehom? A tehom abyss is an upside down mountain, and the base of the mountain is where the tehom meets the level of the earth. But if you took out the darkness of a Tehom and flipped it on its side, it looks like a mountain. In fact, the Zohar talks about mountains of light and mountains of darkness. And I immediately put in the Tehom. And so you try to imagine a person says, I'm gonna examine the Tehom. For what purpose? Just see what's there. You don't know what might grab you. You don't know what force of the dark is gonna capture your imagination and tell you what to be. So this idea that whatever my heart tells me, I'm just going to follow my heart. That's common advice today. It is the exact wrong advice from this Torah portion. The Torah portion says, "Lo taturu acharei levavchem." Don't follow your heart. In fact, my contrarian nature loves bringing that out. Someone says, I think I'm just going to follow my heart. I said, that's against the Torah. People, what do you mean it's against the Torah? I said, the Torah says, Lo taturu acharei levavchem. Well, what am I supposed to be following? Well, maybe you're neshama, maybe your higher self, maybe din emet v'shalom, anything but whatever emotion pops up. So the word lev in Hebrew, unless it has a modifier, like lev yodea, a knowing heart. Without a modifier, it's the lev of Genesis chapter 6:5. Kol yetzer machshavot libo rak kol hayom. Kol yetzer, all of the shaping, machshavot libo, the thoughts of his heart, rak kol hayom, are only bad all day long. You've got to always remember Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. The heart, the lev, kol machshavot libo, all of the thoughts of the heart, rak kol hayom, only bad all day long. It's a startling thing. But if your emotional inner life, that range of thoughts, feelings, emotions that don't have a moral guide, if you let them go on their own, along with the eyes, looking for stuff, and the heart feeding the valence, you are likely to end up in a bad place. When I ask people, how did you get this way? What did you do? What led you to this? They tell me a series of coincidences. Nearly everybody who ends up in a 12-step program, how this happened. I had cravings. Did anybody ever teach you what to do with cravings? No, I was kind of on my own. Just I had cravings and I craved something. So think of all the people you know who have ended in a bad place and would have done different things. Did they have a teaching? Was there someone to say, here's what you do with those emotions? Here's what you do with these feelings. Here's what you do with what your eyes see, meaning what we think is right. There's a way to verify whether something is true or not. So this Torah portion these few words have a profound depth, right? That says we're going to wear something on our garment to remind us, lo taturu, acharei levavchem. Don't go wandering around after your heart and your eyes, which have led you astray. Now, if there's any single sentence that contains the human condition in the Bible, this is probably one of them, along with Genesis 6 verse 5, Kol Yetzer Machshavot Libo Rak Rak Kol Hayom. The shape of the thoughts of his lev are all bad all day long. The lev left by itself is destructive. We don't like to say that. People say, isn't the lev more uh, non-valent? It can go one way or the other. Whenever you see the word lev, heart, acting by itself, it always ends up doing something bad. You have to have a metaphor. My favorite metaphor is a lev yodea, a knowing heart, or a lev ohev, a loving heart. Okay, so whenever you use the word lev, you have to have a modifier. So you're not talking about the raw energy of the heart, which left by itself will find itself into mischief, if not worse. So this says, don't do that. We've had enough. So now I look at the man who pierced God's name. So there he was, pierced, feeling bad, maybe every day feeling bad. Now he turns 18, time to line up with the tribe. After all that time of figuring this thing out, and his mother trying to tell him, you don't fit with the tribe. We've got to solve this one. I mean, you can live here. There's a lot of people who don't fit in the tribe. We all live outside the camp, and kind of between you and me is a kind of a party scene. All the people who didn't have a place to live, and mom said, "We'll work it out. We'll work it out. But don't get mad about it." He said, "No, this is wrong. I need a place in the tribe. I'm going to storm in there." You ever seen anybody get to storm in somewhere? You ever seen that? And you say, "Don't do it. Don't storm in there." And I says, "No, I'm going to storm in there." One of my few things when I was the barrack sergeant when I was back in the military. There's a quarrel going on, and the guy's getting ready, and there's this huge guy. He says, "I'm gonna go in there." I said, "Man, you don't want to go to jail." So like I'm half his size. I put my hands on his huge biceps. I said, "Settle down, take care of the morning, just go, go back to your room, go to sleep. Right? It's gonna be good." "Oh, Sergeant, thank you so much, man. I forgot." "Yeah, yeah, you're right." And so he gets into his room. I go downstairs to the duty office, and he goes, "Hell no!" He pounds the door, and he's out of his room. I thought, "Oh man." And yeah, he created havoc. We had to call the military police, and they put him in handcuffs, threw him in the back of a pickup truck, and took him away. And I thought to myself, I got through to him for a minute. But his Lev said he had to even things out. Whatever somebody said to them, they had to pay the price for saying something to him. So I've seen many people says, "I'm gonna go do this," and I'm saying, "Please don't. Just take a day, sleep on it, please." And they say, "No, I cannot stand for this to have happened." So that's the Lev speaking. The Lev speaking is on one hand urgent, obstreperous, wants to do things this way, or there's another kind of Lev which is timid and timorous and won't take a stand. That's their Lev. So my Lev says, be timid, don't say anything, run away. Another part of my Lev says, this is not tolerable, I'm going to make a mess. Well, there's something called the law of God. And the law of God is don't do destructive things, and also don't stand by in the blood of your friend. I mean, there's a whole set of laws that can tell us how to live. You don't have to make it up on your own. You can say, well, my emotions feel one thing. My eyes are seeing something that matters a little bit. The main thing is there's a great teaching. This Torah portion says there's a great teaching that all the nations of the world are jealous of. And you study this teaching, and you're given so many guides for life, for yourself, for lifelong relationships, for raising children, how to build society. It's one piece of wisdom after another, but either we don't read it at all, or we forget when it counts. We forget when it counts. There are so many parts of our law in the Bible, and then in the place like the Pirkei Avot, which again I recommend that all of you study every summer. Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, it's in any traditional prayer book. I study Bible every day. I try to fill myself with the worldview of the Bible, and there's a part of me that says, I know what to do. I'll be on the street, I'll be somewhere, something's going on in Israel, and I'll just know what to do. Let me tell you one of the main things I know what to do. There's a lot of hatred here. Most of the hatred is directed at Netanyahu and this government. Before it was the judicial reform, and now it's the war. Now, the so-called silent majority in Israel, the most popular political party in Israel is Netanyahu's party called the Likud. The second most important political party is Bennett, who's also somewhat center-right, but he's not Netanyahu. The third is a guy named Eisenkopf, who defected from some more left-oriented center-right, and he's joined the center-right. So whatever happens, most Israelis support a center-right party unless they happen to be Orthodox. I'm not saying that the leftist progressives don't have, a viable party, but not like the Israeli center. The Israeli center, and I'm going to put myself there, with great heaviness of heart, wants Hamas to go away. That this war cannot allow Hamas to be standing. It's like, kind of fighting Hitler, into his last warren of underground caves or underground fortifications, and then walking away and let Hitler reestablish himself. So in the Second World War, Franklin Roosevelt said unconditional surrender. When this war is over, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany are no longer going to exist. And what did we create out of Germany, the United States, and Japan? Flourishing, prosperous democracies. That's what will happen in Gaza. If Israel can get rid of Hamas, Israel will play a role in creating a prosperous, democratic Gaza if that's what the Gazans want. But the world, with this lie of genocide and starvation and all the other things that they're putting out there, they're chaining Israel's hands. And the left here, all they focus on is the hostages. Nothing is more important than the hostages. It takes a great leader to say, as important as they are, what's most important is the next 50 years. Yes, the hostages are important. We also have an enemy who has said that they will redo October 7th 1,000 times until the state of Israel is destroyed, and they mean it. It takes a it takes a leader who's willing to be hated by history to say, I'm devoting the rest of my administration to conquering Hamas. Hopefully he'll get the hostages out. I mean, he really wants them out. But mostly, I don't want the next administration and the next generation of Israelis to inherit this war. Something has to be done. Now's the time to do it. So, so when a person comes to me with all this hatred, so here's something I know from the Torah. Don't hate your brother in your heart. So I say to them, I just had this conversation on Wednesday. I said, could you tell me what you need to say with less hatred? The person said, wow, do I sound like a hate? As you really sound like a hater. They said, I really apologize because it's an ethos in our tradition. Don't hate you. As they calm down. And they start, like rattling off the facts. I said, okay, good. Now, may I offer you something? Sure. I'd like to know where you're getting your facts. Just tell me your source. They said, okay, almost admitting guilt from Haaretz magazine. Got it. And we both know that Haaretz will only present a pretty extreme left-wing point of view. I'm not saying it's not right. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying we both know. Yes. I say, do you watch other sources just to see if there's another way of saying things? She says, I should, but I don't. I said, well, I watch, the Haaretz news, and I watch it's called Con 11. I watched number 12, number 13, and number 14. Now, number 14, by the way, from a leftist point of view, is Treif. She says, you watch channel 14? I said, yes. How often? I said, it's the only channel I watch. And she flipped out. I said, no, it's one of the channels I watch. She says, she says to me, my husband also watches 14, and I get angry and yell, and I storm out of the room because he's trying to get a different point of view. So she said to me, when my husband puts on 14, in order to get a different point of view, she says, I stomp my feet and yell and I stomp out of the room. And she says, she's kind of looking, she says, that's not good, is it? I said, I don't think that's good. I don't think it's good for your marriage. It's not good for you. It's not good for the country. So I have this wealth of, of mores behind me that says, don't hate, number one, don't hate. Get as many point of views as you can and assess them. And remember, the main thing that you got is guidance is din, emet, vishalom, Pirkei Avot 118. Din, think well, think logically. Emet, get to the truth of things, get to the truth of things. and shalom, all in the purpose of peace. If you just remember those things, din, emet, v'shalom, uh, um, what I'll call good thinking, truth, and peace to everything that came in our life. What this little section of the Torah says, Lo taturu acharei levavchem ve'acharei einechem. Don't go wandering around after your heart and eyes, after which you would go astray. If you say to yourself, instead of just following my heart in the biblical sense, which is anything my emotions say is right, you say to yourself, my emotions have a voice, it's not dispositive, meaning it's not going to tell me what to do. It's important, but only one factor. The main factor, and again, I have many, but because I was studying this last night, the main factor is good thinking, truth, and peace. Whatever my emotions say. Whatever my emotions say, I'll say, thank you for your vote now. Good thinking, din. Truth, find truth, v'shalom, for the sake of peace. So for me, I I I always try to find a verse early in the day or sometime in the day where my soul says that. I mean, again, I get a verification from my inner life that says that's a verse to take with you, and I memorize the verse, and it's like a medium VK. It's the thing I take around with me. And there are moments when there's something happens, and I will say to a person, can I offer you a thought? And it's not my thought. It's not my thought. It's a thought that's in the Jewish tradition for 3,000 years. It's one of those thoughts, and it stood the test of time, and it's made people better. So when I look at our cases of the piercing the name of God and the spies, and even the man who went out and committed suicide, again, on one hand, I'm going to say we have no idea what people go through. On the other hand, I've seen the aftermath with the families. I've I've never seen a family handle that well. And the one thing I wish I could say to someone who's going to do that is, yes, you have a point. You're done. The world is false. Uh, yeah, I get it, man. But the amount of harm you will cause your family is inconceivable. There's a way to back away from the world and not let it hurt you anymore without doing this kind of raw, eternal damage to your family, to a young person, to your mother, to your father, to your siblings. The stigma that you're going to read there has to be another way in terms of human decency. That's the thing I've said. The few times that I've been called to intervene on a young person who wants to commit suicide, they were in the ward at UCLA. The rabbi got called down. I had a word with the person, and I said, "This is in my mind. Al ta'turu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem. Don't follow your heart. Don't follow your emotions. Don't follow your feelings. There's a law. And part of the law is I'm not going to try to that life is good. I'm not going to try to convince you of that, although eventually I hope to. What I hope to convince you of, you're deeply hurting other human beings who don't deserve to be this deeply hurt. You're hurting people." And I knew one of the parents after it happened. I knew the parent. The mother died in mourning. The mother died a broken woman. And and I remember the guy. I knew him beforehand, and I I said if he could have seen a picture of his mother after what happened, this frail, hollow person. I said, Woody, I don't think he'd still do it. I think he was thinking in a limited way. So I wish he would have had a teaching, right, of compassion, a teaching of caring for the heart of another human being, not following his heart, but understanding how the consequences of his actions on another human being. So when I look at the piercer of the name of God, the blasphemer, I look at the spies, I look at the gatherer of sticks, I come to this verse that says, put a piece of blue on your garment, right? For us, anything you want. That's going to remind you that there is a moral and spiritual law, and it does not have to do with your feelings. It doesn't have to do with how you see things. Truth is not what you see. Spiritual truth is not what you feel. There actually is something more than you. You doubt? look at your tzitzit, or whatever else you have that will remind you, I'm not the center of the universe. I'm self-centered, admittedly, but I'm not the center of the universe. And think things through again. All right, this concludes this time section on difficult text. I'll probably begin another series at a later time.